I don't think I'll ever forget that night. It was raining again, not just a drizzle, but that relentless, sideways kind of rain that feels like the sky itself is angry. I stood at the edge of the apartment complex, holding two crying babies in my arms, soaked through my thin jacket, and I remember thinking, how did I get here? Just months ago, I thought I had a life, a future, a partner, security. But that was before everything fell apart. Before the man I thought I loved, the father of my children, decided he was done playing house and walked out like none of it ever meant anything. I'd just given birth to twin daughters. And instead of joy or support, I got silence. Rejection. He said he wasn't ready to be a dad, like it was a job he could just quit mid-shift. He said I tricked him, as if I'd planned to be alone, broke, and scared with two infants and no family willing to help. And that's the cruelest part of this story. It wasn't just him who disappeared. It was everyone. My own mother said, well, you should have thought this through before you got pregnant. As if I hadn't been crying every night begging for someone to stay, to care. My friends stopped calling. They didn't know how to deal with me, the girl who used to be fun, spontaneous, the life of the party, now buried under diapers, bottles, and postpartum depression. I went days without eating properly. I rationed baby formula like it was liquid gold. I reused diapers longer than I should have, praying I wouldn't cause rashes. I looked at my bank account every night and cried silently so the girls wouldn't hear me. Have you ever had to choose between gas money and baby wipes? Between your pride and begging strangers online for a crib? I have. And you know what hurt most? Not the hunger, not the exhaustion, but the way people looked at me. Like I was a statistic, a cautionary tale, a failure. They didn't see the love I had for my daughters. The way I stayed up all night making sure they were warm. The way I whispered to them that someday, somehow, we'd be okay. They just saw a single mom with two screaming babies. And turned away. There were nights I thought about giving up. Not ending my life, but disappearing. Walking into a shelter and signing the papers. Telling myself maybe my girls would have a better shot without me dragging them down. But every time I looked into their eyes, I knew one thing. No one was coming to save us. So I had to keep going. I was sleep-deprived, starving, spiritually numb. But I kept moving. I held both of them in my arms and told them, Mama's still here. Even if the world wasn't. It was one of those mornings that felt like a breaking point. The twins had both been sick the night before, screaming with fever, both of them clinging to me like I was the only thing anchoring them to this world. I hadn't slept in over 30 hours. I was out of formula. And my food stamps wouldn't renew for another 3 days. I stared at my kitchen counter, empty, bare, and then looked at my babies, pale, whimpering, and hungry. Something inside me snapped. I bundled them up in mismatched clothes, wrapped a scarf around my unwashed hair, and walked outside with no plan. I just walked. I didn't know where I was going. The grocery store? The clinic? I didn't even have enough money for a bus ride. I just kept moving, hoping maybe if I walked far enough, the panic would quiet down. The rain started again. Because of course it did. I sat down on a bench outside the library, trying to shelter the twins from the wind, and I broke. I sobbed right there in public, no shame left to hide behind. That's when I saw him. A man. Tall. Clean-cut. In an expensive coat. Talking on his phone. And he saw me. Really saw me. Our eyes met for the briefest second, and instead of looking away like everyone else, he hesitated. Then he ended his call and walked toward me. I remember clutching the girls tighter, preparing myself for judgment, or pity, or worse, some half-baked lecture about life choices from someone who had never known hunger a day in his life. But when he spoke, it was just 6 words. Do you need help with them? I blinked up at him, caught off guard. He wasn't smiling with pity, it was gentleness. Not charity. Not performance. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. Just tears. He sat on the bench beside me, not close, not invasive, and said softly, I've got time. And I've got a car. If you tell me what you need, I'll listen. I didn't trust him. Of course I didn't. But I was out of options. My babies needed food. I needed a ride. And something about his voice, calm, measured, made me feel like maybe, just maybe, I wasn't invisible anymore. I finally whispered, formula. I just need formula. He nodded. All right, he said. Let's get your daughters taken care of first. Then we can worry about everything else. And that was it. No questioning. No guilt. He helped me into his car, a sleek, black luxury SUV that felt more like a spaceship than anything I'd ever been in. He turned the heat on full blast, handed me a clean blanket from the back seat, and said, "You rest. I've got this." In that moment, I wasn't a single mother struggling on a bench. I wasn't the failure I'd been made to feel like. I was just someone who mattered, and he made me feel that without saying another word. The car was so warm I thought I might cry again. The twins had finally stopped fussing, their little bodies relaxing under the soft blanket he gave us, lulled by the hum of the engine and the steady warmth of the air vents. He didn't say much as he drove, just soft glances back to make sure we were okay. We pulled into a grocery store parking lot, not the one I usually went to, the one with flickering lights and locked baby formula cases, but a higher-end store I'd never dared to walk into. The kind of place that sells fruit in perfect little pyramids and water that costs more than rent. I hesitated. He noticed. "Don't worry," he said calmly. "You're not here to impress anyone. You're here to get what you need." That shouldn't have comforted me, but somehow it did. Inside, the bright lights felt like too much. Too clean. Too shiny. He took a cart and started grabbing items, baby formula first. 2 different brands. In case they have sensitivities, he said. Then diapers. Wipes. Pacifiers. Creams. He didn't ask me what I could afford. He just asked what we used. I kept trying to stop him, panic rising in my throat. "That's too much. Please, just 1 can is fine." He looked at me, not annoyed, not dismissive, and said, "You've been doing this alone too long. Let someone help for once." We went through the checkout with a full cart. I stared at the total like it was a joke. He handed over his card like it meant nothing. The cashier gave me that look, a polite smile, a tilted head, the same one I'd gotten 1,000 times before. But this time, it didn't sting, because he was still there, right beside me, not flinching. We walked back to the car in silence. He loaded the bags into the trunk and opened the back door so I could settle the twins in. I stood there, hand on the door, unsure what to say. Because it wasn't just about the food or the supplies. It was about the fact that no one, not even family, had ever stepped in like this. Not once. I turned to him. "Why are you doing this? You don't even know me." He paused, then said something I'll never forget. "Sometimes people show up for strangers because no one ever showed up for them." I felt like the ground shifted under me. He wasn't trying to be a hero. He was just someone who knew what it felt like to be invisible and refused to let it happen to someone else. That day, he didn't just fill my trunk with baby things. He cracked open something in me I'd buried deep, the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as alone as I thought, and that maybe some people give without wanting to own you in return. I had planned to thank him. Just that. A thank you, a nod, maybe even a forced smile. Then I'd take the bags, the twins, and disappear. Back to my tiny apartment with flickering lights and paper-thin walls, where reality waited like a punch to the gut. But he didn't let me. As I lifted one of the bags from his trunk, he gently placed a hand on the edge of the cart. "Hold on," he said softly. "There's one more thing." I froze. My first thought? He wanted something. Anything. People always did. A favor, a number, a conversation that lingered too long. Nothing in this world came without strings. But when I looked at his face, I didn't see calculation. I saw concern. Then he reached into his coat pocket and handed me a small card. Thick, expensive paper, embossed name. It was a business card. "I own a few properties in town," he said slowly, almost as if he was afraid I'd bolt. "One of them is vacant. Clean. Safe. Utilities paid. You can stay there for a few weeks, until you get your feet under you." My heart started racing. I tried to shake my head. "No. I can't accept that. You've already done too much." But he didn't back down. "It's already empty. It's not about charity, it's about breathing room. For you." For them, he gestured toward the twins, sleeping in the car now, cheeks flushed from the warmth. I couldn't speak. No one had ever made me feel like I was worth more than just surviving. And this man, this complete stranger, was offering me space, light, dignity. Not out of guilt. Not for recognition. Just because. He handed me the keys and wrote down the address. "I'll meet you there in 20 minutes. If you decide not to come, that's okay. No pressure. But I'll leave the lights on just in case." And then he drove off. No demands. No promises. Just that quiet, steady kindness that made me wonder if this was some strange dream I'd eventually wake up from. I sat in the car for 10 minutes, just staring at the keys in my hand. I could have gone home. I could have stuck with my pride and gone back to struggling in silence. But then my youngest stirred in her seat, a tiny whimper that reminded me she needed more than my stubbornness. She needed warmth. So I turned the key in the ignition and followed the address. What I found wasn't just a house. It was a chance. The lights were on, just like he said. And for the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't dared to feel again. Safe. The moment I stepped through the doorway, something inside me cracked wide open. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't some Pinterest perfect dream house. But to me, it was a sanctuary. The air was warm and smelled faintly of cedar and fresh paint. The walls were soft beige, clean and quiet. There was no mold creeping along the corners, no buzzing fluorescent lights, no neighbors screaming through paper walls. It was calm. I took one tentative step forward, holding both of my girls close, and my knees nearly buckled. I sank down right there in the entryway, too tired to pretend I was okay. Tears spilled freely, silent and heavy. Because for the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't bracing for disaster. I wasn't wondering if someone was going to knock on the door demanding rent. I wasn't calculating which bill I could delay to buy formula. I was just breathing. The man, I'd later learn his name was Jonathan, came in quietly behind me, arms full of grocery bags. He didn't say much. He just unpacked everything into the modest little kitchen, one item at a time. Diapers, baby soap, even frozen meals. At some point, he gently took the babies from my arms and placed them in the crib he had already set up in the spare bedroom. That nearly broke me again. He thought of everything, every tiny, forgotten detail. Later that evening, I sat at the edge of the couch, sipping warm tea he had made, while the twins slept peacefully in the next room. It felt surreal, like I had stepped into someone else's life. Jonathan sat across from me. Not too close. Not hovering. Just present. We didn't speak much. He asked if I wanted him to leave. I didn't answer right away. Then I said, I don't know what I did to deserve this. He smiled softly, eyes tired but kind. You survived, he said. That's enough. I didn't know it yet, but that moment, that quiet evening, those 4 words, would mark the beginning of everything. Not because he saved me, but because for the first time in a long time, I started to believe I might be worth saving. Weeks passed in a quiet rhythm I didn't recognize at first. Peaceful. Steady. There was no chaos, no screaming fights, no panicked searching for loose change between couch cushions. Just quiet mornings, warm bottles, and soft lullabies that I sang without fear that someone would bang on the wall and tell me to shut up. Jonathan visited often, but never imposed. Sometimes he brought more food. Sometimes clothes for the girls, nothing flashy, just soft little dresses and cozy sleepers with tiny animals on them. Sometimes he brought nothing but his calm, unwavering presence. And those were the visits I began to look forward to the most. He never asked personal questions. Never pried into my past. Never pressed for details about the man who abandoned me or the family who turned their backs. He simply existed beside me, like an anchor I didn't know I needed. And somewhere in the spaces between shared dinners and laughter over spilled juice, something fragile began to bloom. It was subtle at first, the way his eyes lingered on me just a little longer. The way he looked at my daughters like they were already part of his world. The way he listened. Not to reply, not to fix, just to be there. I remember one evening, late autumn, leaves scattered across the porch like forgotten confetti. I was sitting on the floor, folding baby clothes, when he crouched beside me with a quiet smile. You look tired, he said. I gave a small, self-conscious laugh. I always look tired. No, he replied gently. You look like someone who's been strong for too long. That made my hands still. He didn't say more. He didn't have to. Somehow, without either of us realizing it, we had started building something, not just shelter or safety, but connection. A shared heartbeat between 2 people who had never expected to find anything like this. I wasn't looking for love. That part of me had gone cold long ago. But love, in its softest, quietest form, had found me anyway. It was raining again that day, not the violent kind, but the soft, steady type that made everything feel like a memory. I had just put the girls down for their afternoon nap when Jonathan arrived with his usual knock, gentle, almost musical, like he was always asking permission to enter my world. He had something different in his eyes that day. A hesitation. Like he'd come not just to bring something, but to say something. We sat down like we always did, tea between us, silence comfortable. But the silence stretched and stretched. Then he exhaled, long and slow, and said, There's something I need to tell you. About me. My stomach clenched. I nodded, trying not to let fear rise in my throat. He looked down at his hands for a moment. I didn't lie to you. I just didn't share everything. He reached into his coat and pulled out a slim envelope. Inside was a glossy magazine page, and there he was. His name. Full name. Jonathan Ellis, tech innovator and philanthropist, the headline read. A millionaire. A man whose face was on the covers of business magazines. I stared at it in disbelief. He kept speaking, his voice low. I didn't want to lead with that. Because I've seen what money does to people. What it makes them assume. And you never asked for anything. You didn't even want the help at first. He looked me in the eyes. That's why I trust you. Why I keep coming back. I couldn't breathe for a moment. This man, this gentle, steady, quiet soul, was someone I'd seen on the newsstands and never thought I'd meet in 100 lifetimes. And he was sitting on my couch, caring for my daughters, seeing me, not as charity, but as me. I didn't want to make you feel small, he continued. But I also don't want to keep this from you anymore. If we're building something, you deserve the truth. I didn't know what to say, so I did the only thing that felt honest. I reached across the table and took his hand. I don't care what's in your bank account, I whispered. You saw me when I had nothing. That means more than anything else ever could. And in that quiet moment, hand in hand, two broken worlds finally started to merge into one. It was almost perfect. For the first time in years, life felt like it was finally unfolding gently instead of crashing down. Jonathan and I were something. Not quite labeled, but growing. The girls adored him, their squeals of joy whenever he walked in became the soundtrack of our home. And I started to believe, just maybe, that I was allowed to be happy again. But life doesn't let you move on without testing you first. It started with a knock on the door. A loud one. I opened it to find a face I hadn't seen since the day I gave birth, the father of my children. Disheveled. Angry. Entitled. Where the hell have you been? He barked. I've been looking for you. No, he hadn't. He hadn't come to the hospital. He hadn't texted. He hadn't cared. Now he was here, smelling like beer and desperation. I stepped outside quickly, closing the door behind me to keep the girls and Jonathan, who was in the kitchen, out of earshot. What do you want? I asked, arms folded tight across my chest. He scoffed. I heard you're living in some millionaire's house. Figures you'd throw yourself at the first guy with a wallet. That stung. Not because it was true, it wasn't. But because he knew how to hit the nerves that still bled. I'm here for my kids, he said. You don't get to keep them from me. That's when the rage kicked in. I had begged him for help when I was pregnant. Begged for support, even just a ride to the doctor. He vanished. And now that someone else had stepped in, someone kind, he came crawling back. Not out of love, but out of ego. Before I could say a word, the front door opened. Jonathan stepped out. He stood beside me, calm but firm. You need to leave. The man laughed. Oh, so this is the guy? You think money means you can play daddy now? Jonathan didn't flinch. I don't play anything, but I protect the people I care about, and I won't let you harass her. The air went still. My ex spit out a few more threats, then stormed off, cursing under his breath. And I just stood there, shaking. Jonathan reached out, but I pulled away at first. I'm sorry, I whispered. You didn't sign up for any of this. He looked me straight in the eye. I didn't sign up for anything, he said. I chose it. I chose you. All of you. I broke. Collapsed into his chest, sobbing harder than I had in months. Because I believed him. Because for once, someone didn't run when it got hard. He stayed. If someone had told me a few months ago that a man I met during a storm would become the most constant force in my life, I would have laughed or cried. Maybe both. Because back then, I didn't believe in things like fate, or second chances, or unconditional love. But Jonathan changed that. Not with grand gestures. Not with flowers or fairy tales. But with consistency. With warmth. With presence. He became part of our rhythm. He learned how to warm bottles just right, how to soothe the girls when they were teething, how to make them giggle until they hiccuped. And he learned me too, my silences, my late-night anxieties, the way I froze when bills came, or when the past knocked on the door again. He never judged. He just stood beside me, quietly, steadily, like the world couldn't touch me as long as he was near. The girls started calling him Papa before I even realized they had started saying it. I heard it one morning as he tied their little shoes, his fingers clumsy but patient. One of them looked up and said it so simply, so naturally. Papa. He froze, looked at me, and I just nodded. Because he was. We never had some flashy proposal. No diamond rings or candlelit dinners. Instead, one night, as we lay curled up on the worn-out couch with both girls asleep between us, he whispered into my hair, I want to be yours. Officially. All the way. And I didn't even need to say yes. My tears did it for me. We got married in the backyard of that same house he first brought us to. Simple, beautiful, safe. And when we moved into a bigger home months later, with more space and light and laughter than I ever dreamed possible, I still kept the old house key on my chain. A reminder of the night a stranger offered me warmth, of the man who didn't just help me stand, but build a future where I could finally fly.